done so well. It's a shame you're not cut out for this.
The best compliment I could give Hollowbody is that it feels like an early PS2 survival horror title. It takes the gameplay formula of the classic Silent Hill titles and runs with it, with a dash of Tech-Noir. A solo developer project, Hollowbody continues the streak of quality indie releases in the survival horror realm. Like Conscript and Crow Country from earlier this year, if you're craving a new, classic survival horror experience, look to the indies. Hollowbody did leave me wanting more. It is a bit on the short side, even by survival horror standards, but I did enjoy my time with it. And if you also back the game on Kickstarter, you should as well. If you're a fan of what I cover on the channel, it'll be right up your alley as far as a purchase goes. In this video, I'll go over how Hollowbody nails the classic Silent Hill gameplay formula and what it brings to the table. As this is a new release, I will try to keep spoilers to a minimum. Before beginning, I did receive an early review key, so thanks to Strange Signals PR for sending one my way. In Hollowbody, we play as Mika, or Meek as her friend Tax calls her. Mika is an unlicensed black market shipper. The game takes place in not-so-jolly old England of the future. In the mid-21st century, there was a suspected bioterrorism attack of unknown origins, an attack that targeted several British cities. While some were able to make it out, others weren't so fortunate. Towering walls sealed off these cities to prevent spreading. Those left behind were incinerated by orbital strikes. We're about 60 years give or take removed from these events. It's never been clear what exactly happened, and some still seek answers. One of those being Sasha, who we start the game with. Do note the pronunciation of Sasha. I know I'll get comments about it otherwise. I know Americans say Sasha, but in England and here in Canada, it's pronounced Sasha. One of those many oddities of the English language. Anyways, with a small team at the city limits, they're seeking the possible source of these attacks all these years ago. Looking for a missing member of the team, Sasha comes across a monstrosity and goes radio silent. Cut to 12 days later, now as Mika. Through her friend Tax, we're able to get clearance for a 2-hour flight window into the exclusion zone. You could feel that Tech-Noir influence from works like Blade Runner during this intro, especially this one shot.
My guy's waiting on the east sheets, Borough 7 near the underpass.
When flying over the exclusion zone, her vehicle gives out and crashes. With spotty reception, we're unable to use our radio. Mika needs to get in contact with Tax to make an evac plan and find Sasha. While the Tech-Noir elements are more upfront in the game's intro, they fade more into the background during the game itself. We'll spend our time making our way through incinerated streets and ruined interiors. We'll come across various pieces of technology more in line with a Tech-Noir setting. Approaching corpses will bring up info about them, at least what isn't classified information. This will vary depending on the corpse. The in-game menu itself evokes the feeling of Tech-Noir, like something you'd find right out of Blade Runner. Now, while this Tech-Noir does add a unique flair to the presentation of Hollowbody, at its core it wears its Silent Hill influence on its sleeve. When it comes to the presentation side of the equation, this is most evident through its camera. Hollowbody uses a mixture of dynamic and fixed camera angles, switching to fixed angles to bring your attention to objects or locations. Mika's head will look at items within range to draw further attention to them. Dead ends out in these streets make great use of fixed camera angles to build a mood and guide us elsewhere. Whereas Silent Hill makes heavy use of fog for its atmosphere, Hollowbody uses rain. There's a constant downpour while we're outside, along with thunder and lightning. The game shows a strong understanding of how to use lighting to guide the player, along with shifting camera angles. While the rain obscures our vision, distant lights will guide our way forward. Always look to the light, in more ways than one. The classic approach of guiding the player that doesn't rely on immersion breaking means of yellow paint, the character being a chatterbox, or objective markers. Now, to be fair, unobtrusive guidance is far easier to do with lower graphic fidelity than modern graphics. As mentioned, Hollowbody won't look out of place as an early PS2 title, a means to help the game stand out from other indie titles in a similar vein. It's oh so common for the indie space to use the PS1 aesthetic, and for good reason. I do hope to see other indie developers in the survival horror space go for a more 6th-gen approach to graphic fidelity. Hollowbody is a strong showing of what you can do with a bit of quality camera work and lighting, where you could guide the player in a more unconscious way, and one that doesn't feel like it's holding your hand at every step of the way. the way it used to be. If only modern large budget titles weren't so terrified of using fixed camera angles. On the note of Silent Hill, yellow paint, and the Silent Hill 2 remake around the corner as of writing, the developers mentioned they won't rely on using yellow paint to guide the player. That said, they didn't say anything about using yellow tape, as evident in this one gameplay preview. But hold that thought for another day. We're talking about Hollowbody here. Rounding off the stellar presentation is the stellar music. Several of these small indie horror games tend to bring in someone else for the music. Not here, once again all done by the game's sole developer. Tracks consist of droning, ambient notes that evoke that cyberpunk feel, with textures and sounds that wouldn't sound out of place in Silent Hill. Some that play during short stretches can be downright terrifying in the mood they evoke. On the gameplay front, Hollowbody pays heavy homage to the works of classic Silent Hill, a focus on the exploration and puzzle solving. We don't have to worry about limited inventories or item boxes. While I always prefer my survival horror with limited inventories, if you're taking a more Silent Hill approach, I'm fine without it. Resources aren't bountiful, but you can stock up if you're thorough in your exploration. We have a few weapons of choice on the combat front. We can swap between a melee weapon and firearm in-game, as opposed to switching in the menu. There are a couple of weapons that are quite British. After all, the developer of Hollowbody resides in Bristol. You can find a bow and arrow to pick off enemies at a distance. We can find an electric guitar to smash enemies with. Although there's a bit of a missed opportunity here. The guitar is a solid body guitar. Why not give us a Hollowbody guitar? You know, considering the game's name is Hollowbody after all. Although for all I know, there is a Hollowbody guitar in the game and I missed it. The monsters we come across are quite unsettling. Props to the sound design, especially the wheezing sounds they make. Our radio will pipe up upon approaching an enemy. They can take a fair amount of damage. The standard enemy takes about a full round to put down with the pistol. You can attempt to juke around them. Some interiors give more than enough room to get past. Same goes for outdoor sections, although most stretches have all sorts of junk on the streets to consider. Enemies are somewhat unpredictable in their movements, making juking a bit of a dice roll. Attacks that hit hard should your juke fail. On the note of running, I can't recall playing another game that nails the feeling of the Silent Hill movement than Hollowbody. Mika's movement speed and the swaying of her flashlight as you run feels straight out of the iconic series. What also helps with this feeling are the environments we travel through, such as the apartment complex in the game's earlier stretch. One that's a heavy nod to the Woodside Apartments from Silent Hill 2. While it does take heavy influence, Hollowbody does deviate enough to make it its own. It takes the foundation of how the locale unfolds, unlocking rooms or floors one by one, backtracking, finding key items, solving puzzles. Now this may come as a shock, but there's a sewer section that may very well be the game's highlight. Yes, a sewer section that's not a game's low point. In Hollowbody, it doesn't overstay its welcome and takes advantage of its maze-like structure. Instead of creating frustration, it creates confusion and unease to throw you for a loop. With strong visual cues and camera work, it's easy to get a feel of where you need to go. It manages to avoid the pitfalls that befall most sewer levels, and has some of the game's most unsettling, memorable moments. Now, at the beginning of this video, I did say that Hollowbody left me wanting more. This tends to be a sign of quality, where a game doesn't overstay its welcome and you consider a replay. Hollowbody does adhere to this. That said, the feeling of wanting more was also due to how the game felt like it needed one more interior section, something that there were plans for in its Kickstarter. Had the Kickstarter reached £30,000, or about $32,500 US, there was to be one more area. A shopping mall based off one in Bristol, inspired by the mall in Silent Hill 3. The Kickstarter raised around $28,000 in total, a bit short of that stretch goal. All locales in Hollowbody are great, from the interiors to the streets. Still, it's too bad there was no mall, because one more interior section would have hit the sweet spot. Another 20 to 30 minute stretch would have helped satisfy the feeling of wanting more. But that's easier said than done, especially when you're working with a very modest budget and as a solo developer. You have to make the most of what you have through crowdfunding. By no means is it a huge detriment to Hollowbody, but one to note. Where the game also felt me wanting more is through the puzzles. The ones in Hollowbody were enjoyable for the most part, but I would have loved to have sank my teeth into a few more. There's one early game puzzle that had me looking forward for what was to come. Finding the combination of a safe, Classic survival horror puzzle. It's a fantastic example of a palate cleanser puzzle. Keep everything to one room, give clues for the players to fill in the blanks. One that doesn't bring the game to a standstill. Not a huge brain teaser, but enough to give the player a sense of satisfaction in solving. You also have a Resident Evil staple of flipping switches to get the voltage in the right range. But there's one kind of puzzle within Hollowbody that I'm not a fan of. Something that's very common in survival horror titles. The puzzles where you regurgitate info you found elsewhere to progress, where you either wrote down or memorized info to enter at another location. No need to fill in the blanks with the information given. There's a small extra step to this kind of puzzle in Hollowbody, but it's more or less taking that info and entering it elsewhere. Now, this has been on my mind as of late for a couple of reasons. One, I do have plans for making a video looking at the different kinds of survival horror puzzles. Second, I've played many a title as of late that have featured these kind of regurgitation puzzles. Even some of the best survival horror titles suffer from including these kinds. Hollowbody is yet another survival horror title that includes one. A puzzle type I've never been a fan of, and would love to see survival horror titles move away from. I had a tinge of disappointment seeing one pop up in Hollowbody after starting with such a strong palate cleanser puzzle earlier on. There is another kind of puzzle within Hollowbody. One you don't see often in these kind of games. Branching dialogue choices to talk a man down from leaping off a roof to his death. It's one of the game's most memorable, tense, and bleak moments.
Did you grow up here? After the collapse?
Mother cared for us.
Your mother, did she?
Our mother.
Bleak is very much the name of the game when it comes to Hollowbody's story. The game uses several storytelling staples of survival horror to unfold its story. At various points, our radio will pick up a signal. We could dial in to listen to the game's version of an audio log. These play out in a cutscene, as opposed to allowing us to walk around as they play. Bleak conversations from long ago to paint a picture of what went on here.
Jesus, this is so messed up. Do you really little demons suddenly got a conscience, don't you think? I didn't sign up for this shit. I wanted to help. You really thought all these background checks and waivers with some humanitarian effort or something? Give me a break. You need the money just like the rest of us.
Of course, there are plenty of notes scattered about. Newspaper articles, notes from residents, the usual. I did find it a bit tricky trying to piece together the timeline of what happened here. Some notes will have dates to give an idea of the timeline, but it's never clear-cut how things unfolded here. We'll need to piece together ourselves with what we're given. From the displacement of residents, private security forces, quarantine zones, a pharmaceutical conglomerate that seems to have shady dealings, you'll have to put together the puzzle as the player. But even then, there are pieces missing, leaving areas open for interpretation. And then there's the personal elements of Hollowbody's story. One element are the phone calls we'll receive throughout from an unknown party. A voice that does evoke some of that Shodan feel from System Shock with its stuttering nature. Someone watching every move we make.
How do you know my name? How the fuck do you know my name?
Mika does have quite the potty mouth. I know she's not in the best of situations, but the game does overplay its hand with it. If you're going to swear, keep it to a minimum to get the most out of each usage. I will say on the story front, I didn't feel that having a short playable stretch as Sasha at the game's beginning was the right move. It didn't draw me in. It's something that could have served as a cutscene instead. Or start the game off in Mika's apartment and give a little more exposition. We do get stretches throughout that flesh out the relationship between Sasha and Mika. These were more than enough to give the player a reason to care. Hollowbody isn't a deep dive into the inner psyche. Its central mystery beyond finding Sasha is more than enough to keep the player intrigued to see how it plays out. So if you're in the mood for a Silent Hill-inspired title that stands on its own merits, Hollowbody is well worth your time. It's a title that wouldn't feel out of place as an earlier PS2 release. It's another strong showing that if you're looking for a new, classic survival horror experience, look to the indies. A year that's already seen excellent survival horror titles from the indie space like Crow Country and Conscript. If you back the game on Kickstarter, enjoy. If not, Hollowbody is well worth considering as a purchase. Thanks for watching. Special shout out to my fellow Boulder Punchers for the extra support on Patreon or YouTube memberships. For those in the thank you for your patronage tier, American Boot and Tom Terrible. For those in the now this is Boulder Punching tier, Aliatork Satan, CH3, CH2O, Ethan, the Madman in Waco. If you'd like to receive early access to videos, be featured in the credits, receive periodic updates, and my undying gratitude, do consider joining as a patron or YouTube member as a fellow Boulder Puncher. With that, Boulder Punch out.
Little fledgling.
Oh, great. It's you.